Anne, thank you for having some time to talk to us about this. I mean, truly an incredible achievement here, getting this book out. And I want to know, more about this, how you developed this relationship with Anne Rule and really, I guess, how that bond really started.
Well, as a young reporter, I got this shocking interview with a Springfield woman named Elizabeth Diane Downs, who murdered one of her children, and she shot all three of them. One is paralyzed, and the other has had lifelong disabilities because of the shooting incident. But Anne called it the seminal personality profile of a murderous mom. We were both absolutely fascinated by her aberrant behavior, and I think that kind of drew us together. And never had a woman ever before told in such detail how she shot her children. And this is a case that has haunted me for 41 years. And in the book, I finally go into behind the scenes, what it was like to produce a documentary on her and being in the same room with her and watching her come up for parole every 2 years or so. So Anne used the documentary often in her book, she said, and I think that was the first time we realized that we were both fascinated by the same things. What triggers made people murder and why?
Yeah, a quick question just about that. I mean, what was that like being a reporter on the scene? I mean, I'm very familiar with who she was and what she did, but just somebody of that magnitude of, I don't know, of being able to commit something like that, being able to commit a crime like that, and you're reporting on it. Like, what was that like for you personally?
Well, I hadn't really watched the documentary until I wrote the book. Again, I waited until now to kind of go through it. And I don't know whether it was more shocking this time or when I was trying to put it together, because I felt I'd have to pause the tape and stop, because what was going through my mind were so many other things about the wounds on the children and how they said, my mommy shot me, and the lifelong detriments it caused for them. It was like, trying to come up out of water surreptitiously so that she wouldn't notice. That's how I felt as I paused and then would play the tape and go back over it. It really bothers me a lot still.
I can only imagine. I'm sorry for asking that. I just, it's just such a powerful thing that you went through, and talking about that and how that led to this, bond with Anne Rule as well, and that brought that together. And when we talk about Anne Rule, there's so many stories out there, or people know, about like her relationship with Ted Bundy and those kinds of things. But
Yes.
she encountered something like that at a younger age, from what I understand from the book. And can you tell us about that? About Anne Rule's experience with that?
Well, when Anne started writing full time, this was The Stranger Beside Me was one of her first books. She was contracted to write the story about some unknown serial killer, who was attacking countless young women. But she didn't know it at the time. Nobody knew who the killer was. And here she had been working with Ted Bundy at the Seattle Suicide Crisis Line, where such a dichotomy between him trying to save lives on one hand at the suicide hotline, and then going out at night and stalking his prey and viciously murdering them. He was just a sadistic man. So after she found out who the killer was, her relationship with him changed, and the whole trajectory of Stranger Beside Me changed too.
And just, yeah, I can only imagine, from that, how that would shake somebody. In writing this book, you have this decades-long friendship with Anne Rule, but at the same time, you're writing this book about her. Were there some curious or interesting things that you found out that you weren't aware of maybe before, or something that maybe a lot of people may not know that they can find out from this book?
Well, she had an unorthodox childhood. She met her first killer at her grandparents' house, of all things. It's kind of difficult to imagine today, but her grandfather was the sheriff, and he also ran the jail, and that was where they lived. So she spent as much time at at their house as she could. Now, her room was down the hall from the female prisoners. The male prisoners, the female prisoners, and the family all slept under one roof. So she would skip down the hall in her Mary Janes at 9 years old and go and talk to the female prisoners. One of her favorite things was spending the night in the jail cells alone, if you can imagine. But she met this one female killer. Her name is Viola. That's what Anne remembers. And this woman taught her how to crochet. Now, that would never be allowed today, nor would a child be allowed in such close proximity to a cold-blooded killer. She had shot her husband in cold blood. And here this woman had kind of chain stitched into Anne's psyche. And, that's a dangerous weapon, a crochet hook. And so I was horrified when she told me that story. But I think it started her obsession with figuring out and decoding the criminal mind.
Yeah, I mean, that's mind-boggling that could even be something that would have happened, because, yeah, you would never in a million years imagine something like that happening now, of a child being allowed into a prison like that.
Yeah, and here they're chain stitching through the bars.
I mean, that's just wild to think about. But I mean, that goes to show, just her life and these different encounters that she had. And, when you talk about true crime, which really is, a lot of people are fans of true crime now, or shows or podcasts like that. But Anne Rule kind of stands out from that, because she doesn't seem to be like a regular true crime author, I guess I would say, because of those experiences. Would you say that's accurate?
I would, and she was a real trailblazer in true crime. When she started in 1969, it was a male-dominated field, and they wrote about it more viscerally, and it was gory and somewhat sensationalized, and they focused on the killers. Anne turned the tables completely on that, and she wanted to focus on the victims too, mostly young women, and she didn't want the parents to remember their children as just a photograph on a cop's bulletin board. She wanted to talk about their hopes and their dreams and what they were like as people. And she cried with the families as she interviewed them and talked to them. She was very empathetic. And she was criticized for her style of writing by focusing on the female victims, but it brought in millions of female readers. And she created true crime as we know it today.
When you look at Anne, and being a part of so many different, investigations and writing these books, what was she like during those investigations, and being such an expert and having so much of a history with this?
Well, she was masterful in her criminal profiling. When she started writing in 1969, serial killers were not being caught. So in 1969, there were about 10,000 murders across America. Only 5% were random and senseless, all right? But by 1981, that number had gone up 3 times higher to about 17%. And criminals just weren't being caught. Now, she helped develop this new program in the 80s with the FBI. It was called the Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. It's still being used today. And not only did she speak to the Senate Judiciary Committee to get funding for this program, but she also helped profilers figure out what the connectors are and, the modus operandi and the tools that they used. So she was a force behind the scenes, also a pioneer in that too. And you got to remember, that was at a time when none of us had home computers. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have surveillance cameras. We didn't have DNA. So the fact that this program is still being used today and she helped usher it in is really a feather in her cap.
Wow, yeah, that's incredible. It's hard to imagine without the lack of all the technology that we have now, and still to be able to do that. So that's pretty amazing. So something else that she did there behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Well, the book, and I want to get the full title here, The Rule of Crime in Me and an Intimate View of Anne Rule, shared by her friend of 30 years. So with this book out, I guess my last question here is, what would you like people to take away from reading this book?
Oh, I want them to know what a wonderful woman she was as a friend, and the woman, behind the author, and how hard she worked for everything she got. I don't think she ever thought she would have the kind of meteoric worldwide success that she did, but she worked for it every single day. She went to the trials. She talked to the victims' families. She, researched every tidbit. And with her knowledge on, criminal behavior and criminal profiling, she wrote remarkable books. So, she was also, she had the best eye in the business for picking stories that make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. And she would always say, if it doesn't make her hair stand up on the back of her neck, it's not going to be an Anne Rule book. So she knew how to choose her subjects wisely, and she had the background and the expertise to pull it off every single time. 35 books, all of them on the New York Times bestseller list. There were 4 books that were on there all at the same time, and something like 17 TV movies. She and I were up at Small Sacrifices. I played myself in the movie, a reporter. And it was great to see her get her due and sitting in the big director's chair. So I think people, if you love Anne Rule, if you love true crime, you're going to love this book.
Well, Anne, thank you very much for having some time to talk to us about it. And again, congratulations on this and getting this story out there about your friend, and everybody's going to get to see, more about her and learn more about her than they have before. And thank you very much for joining us here on Fox 12 Now.
I just hope I do her justice.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. Thanks, Anne.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, and speaking of that book, it is out for sale now on Amazon. So today, if you're watching here on April 14th, this is when it was released. And huge thank you to Anne Jaeger for joining us here to talk about that book. And thank you to all of you for watching this show. So Fox 12 Now, we are live streaming here from the Fox 12 Oregon newsroom, but you can watch all those segments afterward on the Fox 12 Oregon app or KPTV.com or wherever you're finding us. Thanks for doing so. You can share these as well. We always appreciate that. And if you have a topic or something that you think would make a good segment, a little longer form segment, feel free to send me an email, fox12now@kptv.com. And that's a good way to get a hold of us. But thank you for joining us. That's it for right now. I'll talk to you soon. Again, I'm Greg Nibbler.